Lisa's... Oh, my goodness. We're fine. We're all right. The latest... Fucking hell.
Welcome to Beer Christianity. My name is Jonty.
I'm Laura.
I'm Malky.
And welcome to the first episode of 2021.
Woo! It's an entirely new year. Nothing bad can happen because it's not 2020 anymore. Coronavirus is gone.
Racism is over.
America has righted itself.
Yeah.
It's all great.
Britain has finally got a hold of itself and is being run in a...
Climate's solved.
Climate's fixed.
Fixed.
Got our sovereignty back.
We finally took back control. Oh yeah, Brexit has happened. Like a whole bunch of stuff has happened. I fell down the stairs tonight, guys. I fell down the stairs and hurt myself quite badly. And instead of going to A&E, I am in fact...
on the good recommendation of actual Dr. Helen Paynter.
Actual Dr. Helen Paynter, who you'll find out why I was talking to her. But she was just like, okay, I can answer your question. But first of all, you should really go to A&E. Because Helen is an actual doctor as well as a doctor of philosophy. So philosophy, theology. What's the difference? It's God's philosophy.
They're not maybe going to enjoy the distinction of actual doctor and doctor of theology.
Sorry, Helen.
Both of which are actual doctors.
She's both of them, so she
would
be
both of them. So, medical doctor and doctor of theology.
There we go.
Rather than actual theology.
One of my favorite memes of all time is that one where it's like, this man is dying. Is there a doctor in the house? I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor of philosophy. He's dying. We're all dying. Makes me happy. Okay. So in this episode, thank you for tuning in, by the way, or listening or whatever. Welcome and all that. If this is your first time, you can find the rest of them at beerchristianity.libsyn.com. Please follow us on Twitter, beerxianity. Leave us a voice note on SpeakPipe. And wait, I'll tell you the address because I actually have it set up this time.
What?
SpeakPipe.com/beerchristianity. Is that right?
New for 2021.
That's not right.
Displays forethought.
I know, right? It's new year, new
wrong?
me. No, it's right. It's right. I checked it. www.speakpipe.com/beerchristianity. You can leave us a voice note and we will play it to you. We will play it to you. We'll play it in the show.
Play it to you. In an intimate recording.
We will come round to your house and we will
play you your SpeakPipe message.
That's correct. Oh, I would love to do that. Do you also know, I heard on Reply All that there's this service where you can get a person to speak your message to somebody else that you can't speak to them, which is like just Cameo? Wild. Kind of, but it's just a network of strangers who will do it for free. They'll just go to the person that you want. They'll try and track them down and they'll speak the words you want to say to them. And just the ethical dilemmas that come up. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
You should listen to Reply All. Why not go to a much more successful podcast than this one? That seems fine. You're going to be hearing a voice message that a listener left us on SpeakPipe, where they asked us a theological question, and you're going to be hearing a response from an actual theologian, which I think is pretty freaking excellent.
Pretty damn cool.
We're also going to be hearing a little bit more from Tom Wright in that older interview that we had in the last episode. We're going to be talking a little bit about the resurrection and heaven and, thoughts on those sorts of things.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
You were bigging up an actual theologian, and then you said, and then there's old Tom Wright.
Well, because Tom Wright didn't record this for us, although he did very kindly say that he would like us to get back in touch around Easter time because he's just super busy right now. So we did ask. So he counts, but he only counts that much. He gets to be at the same level. No, Tom, if you're listening, we love you too. Of course, he's listening. Who isn't listening these days?
It's Tom Wright's favorite podcast. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's what everybody says.
That's what he's doing up until Easter. It's just straight binging Beer Christianity in preparation.
Yeah. We've also going to be talking a little bit about our last year's resolutions and what our New Year's resolutions are this year. So it's going to be interesting for Melky, who wasn't on the podcast at last year's resolutions, but we've got a really neat and I think very reasonable solution to that. Laura, you said something horrifying about 2020.
I was listening back to our New Year's episode from last year to try and remember what we said as our New Year's resolutions. And in our last episode from 2019, it was like, let's talk about suffering because it's been a terrible year. And then,
Wow. Yeah.
And then I also discovered that the episode that we recorded in The Eagle and Child, infamous episode 17, was recorded in 2020, which seems
insane.
ludicrous. That's insane. That wasn't in the same timeline as 2020.
That's crazy. It is absolute craziness.
Absolutely insane.
Laura, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking water.
What?
Because I know I'm desecrating the name of beer Christianity, but not that I've been doing that so far, having staunchly not drunk beer.
Yeah, Jack and Coke Christianity.
I drunk almost a whole bottle of red wine last night, so I decided to stick to the water today, because I thought that was wise.
Seems fair. That seems like
a wise decision.
For the beginning of the year, that's a very kind of reasonable, measured. Yeah, I like it.
It starts me to go on.
Yeah. I mean, let's see how you're doing by December, but like...
Yeah.
Starts me to go on reeling from a hangover.
That's correct.
No one said anything about reeling. I did drink an entire pint of water after I drank my whole bottle of wine, so there's that.
Did you throw up on anyone's dog?
I did not throw up on anyone's dog, no.
Excellent.
No, I'm sure anyone who's thrown up on a dog would, they'd...
What kind of animal?
Kind of creature.
Malky, what are you drinking?
Malky, what have you thrown up on?
Wait, I know what you've thrown up on.
What's Malky thrown up on?
The night before. Wait, can we talk about this? Is it funny yet that the night before your wedding you threw up in your wife's face? Is it public funny yet? I don't know.
I don't know about public funny. I think it's wife funny.
She wasn't in her wedding dress, I hope.
No. She was not.
Okay, good.
Oh man, that was terrible. Given my reformed ways and more or less teetotalism now, then I think that can be amusing. But she dragged me semi-conscious into a walk-in shower to hose me down as I continued vomiting. So we've all been in that place of just like really, really dignified, edifying the world around us. Alcohol is really good for you. Welcome to Beer Christianity.
Please drink responsibly.
I am drinking a South African beer called Castle. This is Castle Light, which is a thing I wish that they would bring to this country, which is like diet beer. It's just not as fattening, essentially. It is 4% alcohol, which is that strong or weak for a beer? I can't actually remember.
I think a little bit weak.
Okay, but not super
normal. Let's see the label.
Wait.
It's gone all funny. This is great.
You've gone all funny. It's the proper You can't read shit. Basically, it's low cal.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
But does it have that horrible like diet taste like diet drinks have? You know what I'm saying?
I mean, it's a little bit thinner, but it's a lager, and it's a South African lager, which tend to be quite like thin tasting. I think we've got a kind of American taste in beer. So yeah, I Castle was my favorite beer in the world until I tasted Tusker. So it is very good.
I didn't actually answer, by the way. I'm on Whole Garden as per.
I'll never not have the urge to make a joke about that name.
Yeah, I'm just reading about it. Hey, it's got coriander and orange peel.
What? Coriander
which,
orange
peel? I really like it, but that's put me off.
Yeah, you've come a long way from Scotland, friend. I
know. Well,
it's a beer.
I hope this doesn't.
And there's Crawley judging Scotland. Okay, well, anyway, you're listening to Beer Christianity. This is the first episode of 2021. And right now, Laura, do you have a message from a listener you want to read us?
That my friend Nick sent me ages ago that I just kept on forgetting that he had sent me. So, Nick, I'm finally reading the message you sent me out like 2 months ago. He messaged me saying, I think this was the Welby episode. And he said, finally getting around to listening to Beer Christianity more, really loving the thought the thought-provoking conversations you guys have, but also the absolute chaos that happens at the same time. The Justin Welby episode is a great display of that. You do a good job at it. Drinking Jack from the Wetherspoon's teat is not a phrase you expect to hear under any circumstances, though, which I think was a Jonty Turner phrase from. It sounds like something that you would say.
It does. I don't know if any of the listeners remember who exactly said it. We'd love to hear from you.
I've got a feeling it was Laura.
It also sounds like
it sounds also like something that I would say. I honestly can't remember. Maybe this is a sign for me to actually listen to our podcast. Hey,
you should occasionally. It's actually really good.
I've heard that it's great. I've heard good things.
Guys, the last episode was genuinely stunning. I thought it was so pretty and so lovely and so like real and just nice. I mean, are you allowed to review your own podcast positively?
The Beer Christianity review on Beer Christianity.
I just thought it was so good.
That's, to be fair, people do that. They have the Welcome to Night Vale made a companion podcast with Welcome to their podcast, where they just went back and listened to episodes of Welcome to Night Vale and just talked about it. Nice. So, we could do that.
We also got a message on our Instagram account. You can follow us, Beer Christianity, on Instagram. And Matt said to us, just finishing this now. I loved it. This is our last episode on annihilationism. I loved it. I actually shouted yes out loud after hearing Jonty talk about how we ought to hope universalism is true. I've been saying this to people for years, which is just lovely to hear. So thank you, Matt. And we're glad that other people feel the same way. And I say we. I am glad that other people feel the same way as me. Congratulations on having the correct opinion.
You can stay.
You're allowed to carry on.
You're allowed to listen again.
Everyone else, please switch off. And I think that may be the same Matt as the person that I'm about to play to you. So
a bit awkward if it's not.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the same Matt, then that's fine. We've got a question on SpeakPipe. So we mentioned earlier SpeakPipe, and it's www.speakpipe.com/beerchristianity, and you can leave us a 90-second voice note with which we will do the following, which is play it to you like now. So this is the one that we heard.
Hi guys, loving the show since discovering it at the tail end of last year, and I've listened back through quite a few now. I've heard the thoughts of Christus Victor as a model for atonement come up along with penal substitution, and I've wondered for a long time to what extent these views are mutually exclusive or whether one can hold the two in contention, and what that means for atonement theory and our salvation. I'd love to know all your thoughts on it, and I'm looking forward to hearing more shows throughout this year. Thanks, guys.
Oh, Matt, what a lovely, lovely message. That is so cool. Thank you so much for sending that.
That is so nice. Thank you so much, Matt. So for anyone who doesn't, maybe some listeners who may be slightly less knowledgeable, not me obviously. Anyone want to explain some of that to our listeners who may not know?
To the listeners, the
listeners.
Nobody in particular.
The poor listeners. Poor ignorant listeners.
All right, poor. I thought you were calling them pawpaws. Do you guys have pawpaws in this country?
Like
no,
a pawpaw?
are they is that papaya?
Oh yeah, in South Africa we call them pawpaws. So, don't be such a pawpaw, man.
We don't do that here.
There's loads of South Africans listening going, nobody fucking says that.
Also, how have you been here 16 years and realised, they don't say, you pawpaws or whatever.
Well, it's the name of a fruit, and I don't love that fruit, so I don't know. Okay, but basically, so he's asking, can Christus Victor be reconciled with penal substitution? I mentioned that question to my wife earlier, and she was like, please don't say penal substitution. It sounds gross, which I think is amazing. Yeah, I mean, Malky, you're the smartest one of us here. What's the deal with Christus Victor and penal substitution? What actually are they for people who are listening who are maybe not super aware of what that stuff is? And if you are aware of it, then this is your opportunity to carry on listening and feel smart, because after we discuss this for a bit, we've got an answer from an actual theologian, because we thought we're probably not quite capable of doing it ourselves.
This is also your opportunity to comment and send us emails about explaining why Malky's explanation of this is wrong.
Yeah.
If you're smarter than him.
Hashtag Malky's a heretic.
Yep.
Well, that was quite an introduction. That was quite a roller coaster there. Right, so roughly, as I understand them, penal substitution, penal punishment, substitution.
Please don't say penal punishment, it's worse. Penal torture. It's just not. Oh, I feel bad. I feel dirty for making that joke.
I was trying to do a serious.
Sorry. Go.
Right. Yeah. So it's about the focus is punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the idea that God is angry and there's punishment that needs to be doled out, and instead of being doled out on sinners, it is doled out on Jesus. The wrath of God is satisfied by Christ's substituting in our place.
Because there's liberal Christians who get angry with that song where it's like, when on that cross, when Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied, and they get pissy about it. And I actually know a lot of good friends who get super pissy about it. And I've always thought the Bible does mention penal substitution, right? It does talk about the crucifixion in those terms, doesn't it? I feel like it does. Like in terms of like our sin means that there is a natural consequence of it, which is death. The wages of sin are death. And therefore, something has to die because of our sin. And penal substitution is, instead of us, it's Jesus.
Yeah, but then even the way you described it there, I feel penal substitution fans would not be happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, saying like, oh, it's the natural consequence. Like, I think, from my background anyway, like I would be saying, no, this is an active, like, anger and wrath punishment from God the Father on Jesus. But yeah, so there's that one. And then Christus Victor, I think, I'm just a guy here, people, all right?
Just a guy standing in front of a podcast audience asking them to treat him like a theologian. Which means sending angry tweets.
And but yeah, Christus Victor is more about Christ's victory over the powers of sin and death and evil and Satan. So at the cross, evil caved in on itself. Jesus won, was victorious, and sort of undid the power of death, and undoing that curse of Adam. Although that may even, the sort of Adam and Jesus, that might even be talked about as a separate atonement theory.
I think it is, actually. I've heard, interestingly, Christus Victor, I've heard described by two very separate groups as attractive to them, as a kind of metaphor for atonement, or for what the cross actually meant theologically, or universally. And one group was, I heard a Middle Eastern Christian saying, look, you really can't come to people in my culture and talk to them about this mamby-pamby forgiveness, peace and love, soft, Jesus. You've got to bring them a slightly more kind of masculine, powerful image of Jesus, who destroys and wins and beats Satan and sin and death, which is weird because, like, I like what it's saying, but the reasons for saying it, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That doesn't want it. Then you got a whole bunch of people who really do warm to the mamby-pamby, soft, gentle Jesus and pacifist Jesus and, justice orientated in the SJW sense Jesus, who want Christus Victor because they hate the idea of an angry God and want to almost disown the idea of an actively angry, wrathful, vengeful God. It's interesting. I believe Christus Victor is an Orthodox thing as well, with a capital O. Is that right?
Yeah, so again, so referencing old Brad Jerzak off of the book that I recommended. What's it called again? A More Christ-Like God. Mm-hmm. He's from a Greek Orthodox persuasion, and he would emphasize Christus Victor. But again, I think part of it, I don't know how many different theories or how many main theories there are I'm going to say something like 7.
Yeah.
But I feel like part of the case might be almost like dials on a knobs on a. There you go. I became self-conscious of saying the word knob, and then there was a pause, and I had Jonty saying Penal in my ear.
You hesitated, man.
The sliders, the faders.
The sliders, that's what the faders, yeah.
And
yeah.
Dials, you can, dial that.
So, I mean, that like realm of joke is probably not going to be appreciated by the person I'm about to quote, who is Stephen J. Wellham, who wrote an article on the 9marks.org website about different atonement theologies. And he describes Christus Victor as it views the primary objects of Christ's death as the powers, sin, death, and Satan. By his work on the cross, Christ liberates us from these powers. In the patristic era, the fathers focused on Christ redeeming us from Satan, while modern adherents focus more on liberation from the powers of sin and death. So you can see why that fits in with a lot of the more kind of progressive Christianity. Christus Victor captures a lot of biblical data, especially Christ's defeat of the powers, Genesis 3:15, John 12:31-33, Colossians 2, verse 13-15, Hebrews 2, verse 14-16, Revelations 12:1-12. But unlike penal substitution, God is not viewed as the primary object of the cross.
Good stuff. Yeah, I just want to further defend my knobs comment. Which is helpful.
Back to knobs.
Guys, we really need to focus on the knobs here.
So language like the primary focus, I think, is helpful, because there could be folks of a certain persuasion that might go, it's Christus Victor and nothing else happened. I'm not interested in anything else going on.
Yeah.
And other folks that might say, yep, Christus Victor is definitely a thing, but the main thing or equally important is penal substitution or whatever.
Yeah.
So it feels like a lot of orthodox positions that you can hold.
Yeah, and I've only actually encountered, in kind of general, like normal person Christian life, I've only ever encountered balls out Christus Victor or penal substitution people. Like, you don't hear the other stuff mentioned a lot as a thing. But you know what? We could actually do an entire episode on atonement theories, which I think is probably quite useful. Would you find that useful?
Yeah, I don't know anything, so...
I mean, I think we've demonstrated we don't know a whole lot either.
We don't know a whole lot.
So,
I've learned things just now, this very second. So a whole episode, I would learn so much.
Pure Christianity, bringing the education.
Giving me the education that I never had.
So, Matt, thank you for that question. And because of your question, I got in touch with our very own dialer theologian, our emergency theologian, Helen Paynter, of the Institute
Available for medical advice
as well.
And theological advice. But only to us.
Of the Institute of Bible and Violence at Bristol Baptist College, and a longtime friend of the podcast. And she very kindly sent us a series of voice notes on a Sunday night when she, could have been doing other things. So thank you so much, Helen, for those. And we're going to play this to you right now.
Hi, Jonty. So you asked me to comment on whether Christus Victor and penal substitution are mutually incompatible or not. And I think the answer is no. People who take a very strong line on penal substitution often want to regard that as the dominant metaphor. But even they wouldn't, I think, want to exclude other metaphors. They would just want to kind of nest it within penal substitution and say that that's the most important one biblically. Personally, I'm not... I don't find it necessary to make that the dominant model, although I certainly wouldn't want to exclude it from my reading of Scripture. I think that both the way that the Old Testament sets up sacrifice and the way that the New Testament picks those motifs up and uses them, particularly the book of Hebrews, but also a number of other places in the New Testament. I think the penal substitution certainly needs to be taken very seriously as one model for what's going on at the cross. But Christus Victor is also an important model. And I think we see the beginnings of that in Genesis 3, where God says to the serpent that the seed of Eve will crush his head or will strike his head, and he will strike the heel of the seed of Eve. And that sort of sets up what I like to call a kind of job description, a role, if you like, which humanity is supposed to fulfill. So humanity, who stand in the position of kingship in the Garden of Eden, because of we see that because of the language of dominion in Genesis 1. So humanity, who really unexpectedly are kings within the garden, are given this task of striking the head of the serpent. So that job description is given to Adam and Eve as the proto-humans, if you like, in the garden, and they fail to do that. But the job description remains in place. The role description, if you like, remains in place, and Abraham inherits that, and he's supposed to achieve it and doesn't fully. Then the nation of Israel, kind of en masse, is given that job description and fails to achieve it. That's where the idea of the Amalekites comes in. The Amalekites kind of represent the serpent, really, in that. In that kind of theological worldview of the Old Testament. King David, well, the kings of Israel in general, but are supposed to inherit that job description and fail to fulfill it largely, although there's glimmers where they succeed. So King David, when he strikes the head of Goliath, and Goliath is clad in scales and speaks very much like the serpent, casting doubt on the faithfulness of God's word. And when David strikes Goliath's head, he is, if you like, kind of beginning to fulfill that job description of striking the head of the enemy, if you like. But nobody completely fulfills it. And so that role kind of remains vacant, remains incompletely fulfilled until the coming of Jesus Christ. And so when the Apostle Paul talks about what happens at the cross as a place where the principalities and the powers are shamed and defeated, and he talks about the cosmic Christ having governance over everything, this is all part of this fulfillment of this job description of Jesus being the one who, in a completely unexpected way, of course, not through sword and fight, but through self-sacrifice. But nonetheless, Jesus is the one who strikes the head of the serpent, the one who actually conquers Satan. And so, yes, Christus Victor is absolutely an important model for understanding what's going on at the cross. It's one that has been set up by the Old Testament and is clearly in view by New Testament writers. And I think in no way is it in conflict with penal substitution. What I would say, I suppose, in closing, is that the cross is the deepest moment in the entirety of history. It's the most mysterious thing. It's the deepest mystery that the human mind can contemplate, I think. And so the idea that we can flatten it out to a single model and say, there, it looks like that. I can wrap it up and put it in a box and explain it, and now I've got it sussed. I think, to be honest, I think it's arrogant if we think we can ever do that. And so the fact that we need multiple models for even beginning to try and understand the extraordinary, wonderful, gracious mystery that it is, I think should be satisfying to us, but also be expected and a delight, actually, because it means there are a number of ways into that mystery, not that we will ever bottom it out. Books and books have been written about that by people far smarter than me, but I hope that helps a little bit. Thanks, bye.
Helen Paynter, very kindly spending a Sunday night dropping us some voice notes just for you, listeners of Beer Christianity. Thank you so much, Helen, for that. Really appreciate it. We'll put some links in the page on the hell is this thing called?
Brilliant.
What is it called? Libsyn.
Oh, it's like the podcast.
We'll put some links on the podcast page at beerchristianity.libsyn.com so that you can find out more about Helen's books and talks and all the cool stuff that she does. Do listen to some of the previous episodes on which she has been with Beer Christianity. What did you guys think of that?
She managed to do the whole thing with hardly any references to penises, which is very impressive.
So impressed.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the way it's meant to be done, but yeah, amazing.
Each to their own.
Absolutely. Bucky, I found that like her kind of final thing actually sounded a little bit like something that you had said about this, about these atonement theories not being the gospel. What was the quote that you'd heard or read?
Yeah, again, this is old Brad Jerzak saying exactly that atonement metaphors, and yeah, it was great that she used that phrase, atonement metaphors are not the gospel. And even looking at the first followers of Jesus, the message that they said in like the book of Acts, they don't get into the nuts and bolts of how or metaphors of what exchange happened at the cross. It's not that important, or, you know, in very short sermons, you know, that they'll be saying what happened. Jesus was the Son of God, was killed and in a couple of places, and you killed him because he's speaking to the crowd, and God raised him from the dead. Now follow him, turn from what you do believe and follow him instead. And yeah, Tom Wright, again, I remember him saying in the past that we need to go to the Gospels, and we've neglected that, or evangelicalism has neglected that a bit, to like what actually happened, what's the narrative of like why Jesus died, as opposed to getting into a kind of systematic theological framework that you kind of overlay on top of events.
And substitute for the gospel, because I remember when Steve Chalk spoke out against penal substitution and called it cosmic child abuse. And, you know, a lot of people in the Baptist world were like, cool, persona non grata, he is now removed from, you know, a load of speaking engagements and became like, you know, the bad boy of Christian theology in the UK, which again is as embarrassing as being the bad boy of Christian rock. And like, you know, people being so attached to the metaphors for understanding scripture that they take on the quality of scripture. I don't know, Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, about Helen's thing, about what you just said.
Helen's thing. I mean, although everything is about me, let's go with me first, and then
your
Helen.
Podcast, so
Our podcast.
Okay. Yeah, I found, you know, having learned about this, but, you know, I don't know, how long ago did we start the podcast? Like, yeah, super concise, and also like, I like the fact that Helen's explanation really emphasizes Christ's humanity. Like, I find that, I don't know, just like the idea of it being this job description that has been handed to humanity and that can only be fulfilled when we have Jesus like in human form. Like, I like that a lot. Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah. So do we think that in answer to Matt's question, do you think you can hold them together? Because honestly, Matt, when you asked this question, I was like, oh, crap. I mean, I always have, but I've always kind of done it in a slightly, you know, coward way of not really saying that out loud too much in case that was theologically untenable and I hadn't really thought it through. But when you think of it as metaphors, then sure, use as many metaphors as you like to understand, you know, what took place on the cross. I think it's just that it is central and important, and that's kind of the most important thing, right?
Yeah. And like, again, with the Steve Chalk thing, it makes me think like, man, for other people on the outside of the sort of Christian subculture, then it's just like, what is the beef, like, because you still uphold all the basic beliefs. Like, all right, you believe Jesus is the Son of God, done miracles, was killed, and was innocently killed, and was raised by God.
And because of him, you're okay with God. And
and
but you have a slightly different emphasis, so I'm afraid you're a fucking heretic and you need to die.
Because you would still say, like, Jesus died for us, or even died for our sins, or died for sin. Like those slight, it's it's just funny that some nuance there would put you outside the camp.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the sort of thing we need to be arguing about that much. I feel like there are worse things that we can be arguing about.
Damn right. Yeah. Like the resurrection and heaven, which is what we're going to move on to next. Look at that professional podcast
segueing. New for 2021.
That's
good
right.
Segues.
Being prepared. So we started off listening to some of an old interview I did with Tom Wright on the last episode, talking a little bit about resurrection, or what were we talking about at the end? I think it was judgment and Christians facing judgment and what that actually looks like. But there were other parts of that interview that I wanted to play the Bare Christianity audience, because I think they're really quite interesting, including stuff about the resurrection. So if the cross is central to Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus is, as central, I would have thought, and I think the resurrection of humanity and of creation, the recreation, the renewing, the new heaven and new earth and all that kind of stuff, I think is the source of a lot of our hope. So I wanted to share some of the stuff that he said, just because he's super smart and has a really cool and interesting take on it. So I'm going to play you some of my interview with him.
You have been writing for some time about and speaking about the fact that we have a misconception of what happens when we die, and that there's this perception that we die and we immediately go to heaven, and it's our soul that goes and our body goes away. Why do you think that has persisted, and what is wrong with that?
It is both wrong, but also not completely wrong, in that if you say to people, no, you must give that up, they think you're saying, therefore there is no teaching about life after death, and though you're just some sort of flatland secularist or whatever. Far from it. But the point is that the Bible is not hugely interested in what happens to people immediately after they die. In fact, though there are 2 or 3 famous verses which deal with it in the New Testament, most of the New Testament is simply not about that at all, but it's rather about God's ultimate plan for the whole creation, which is new heavens and new earth, which involves God's people being raised bodily from the dead. So where somebody is immediately after they die is actually quite hard to describe for us. We don't have good language for it. You can say, if you like, that their soul is with God, but actually the New Testament doesn't say that. It's the Wisdom of Solomon that says that. You can say with Paul that they have gone to be with Christ, which is far better, and that's fine, but that's merely rephrasing the question, really. And I think there's a kind of a reverent agnosticism which we lack when we're dealing with that. We want to say about, exactly what heaven's like and the streets paved with gold and so on, and we forget particularly that the last scene in the Bible is not about people going up to heaven, but about the New Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth, which is the uniting of heaven and earth, which is in view from the very beginning of Genesis.
That you've written before about Paul, and that belief in the resurrection was very much the belief of the Pharisees at the time, and that Paul is definitely working within that tradition of the Pharisaic tradition. Is that one of the reasons why people have been uncomfortable with it, or is it just simpler to have that kind of Platonic dualism between body and spirit?
I think the Platonic dualism has been deeply embedded in Western culture, especially since the 18th century. It's not so clear in the 16th and 17th, but what is the place of resurrection? For many, even evangelical Christians, often the word resurrection simply functions as a metaphor for life after death, or going to heaven, or something. And really, when you examine the way the New Testament uses it, it's not like that at all. And there are lots of hymns which have instantiated this. May we go where he is gone, rest and reign with him in heaven. Excuse me, the reign is not in heaven. The reign is on the new earth, as it says in the book of Revelation. So Paul, yes, he was a Pharisee. There are different kinds of Pharisees, so there are all sorts of different things going on there. But the Pharisees made the kind of quantum leap to the doctrine of resurrection as a sort of, this is what we must now believe. There were hints in the Old Testament before, but it partly grows out of times of great persecution. And the point about resurrection is that it's part of a very this-worldly view of salvation. God is going to redeem this world. He's going to transform this world. So then if Great Uncle Joe was persecuted for his faith and burnt at the stake or whatever, when God makes the new world, Great Uncle Joe is going to have to be raised from the dead, and so on and so on. So that actually the great Old Testament emphasis on the goodness of creation and on God's love for creation and God's celebration of creation comes right the way through, that when you put that together with persecution, horror, war, and death, you're going to end up with resurrection, which is where they do. And so then, but the thing to remember is that what Paul articulates about Jesus' resurrection is significantly different from anything that he believed as a Pharisee, partly because nobody imagined that one person would be raised from the dead ahead of time. It was something that's going to happen to all God's people at the end. And Paul has it, it's one person now, everyone else later. And several other things which I've mapped elsewhere, where you can see that the resurrection of Jesus, it only makes sense within a Pharisaic worldview, but it also bursts the Pharisaic worldview itself apart. And we can plot the ways in which that happened.
So that's Tom Wright talking at the wonderful Greenbelt Festival, and talking to me, 2012, 2014, I have no idea. We're talking about heaven and resurrection and all that kind of stuff. What do you guys think of that?
I love the introduction where you so you've been writing for some time now about some other stuff that we're wrong about. Like any given topic. Yeah.
Just whatever. Wrong. Yeah, we've been pretty wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked it. Like, definitely food for thought. In that, it's one of those things. It's one of those things where it's like, this definitely does make a lot of sense, but like, it makes a lot of sense in the way of like, I've never heard anyone say it like this before, and it's entirely contrary to what all the other stuff that I've been hearing already, which makes me think I need to hear a defense of the other side, because there must be a reason that we've been hearing all of it presented in a certain way, even though this does make a lot of sense. I don't know if that's contrary. Feels like maybe it is.
I remember when I first read some of his thinking on this, when I was reading about his, I think it was his book on Paul, and I was at L'Abri at the UK one, which is not a like super liberal kind of thing. By the way, if you've never been to L'Abri and done like a retreat there, you really should. They're just lovely people. And I spent like a week there, and it was a transformative experience for me. And yeah, anyway, and I remember reading him talking about Paul as a Pharisee, believing Pharisee stuff like the resurrection of the body and how important the resurrection of the body was. And I genuinely felt like I was reading some kind of weird esoteric heresy, you know, like, wait, but we have been talking about heaven the entire time. And now you're saying heaven, not so much, not really that important, maybe, but the real thing that you got to look forward to is bodily resurrection. And just being a little bit freaked out about it, until I realized that it is entirely mainstream Christian thought and has been for generations, for millennia. And yeah, that this focus on some kind of ephemeral pie in the sky when we die thing, rather than a real here and now earth, is one of the reasons why you get bad theology that says screw the earth. Because if it's something that we're ultimately just going to escape, then we can, you know, blow free of it and it doesn't really matter. And also it invites that Platonic dualism that says your body and your spirit are fundamentally separate things, that your body is just a meat suit and it's actually your spirit or your soul or whatever. That is the important part of it. And actually the whole message of the incarnation is that Jesus becomes fully human, you know, in that body, and that you are a body with a soul, you know, or I don't know. What do you think, Marky? You've got thoughts in your face.
Yeah, my main thought was, what's Platonic dualism?
Platonic dualism is like the separation of body and spirit, basically, and ultimately that body bad, spirit good.
Right.
I think obviously it's super fucking embarrassing if I got that wrong. My spirit of the moment.
I don't know if there's anyone you could have said that explanation to who's not going to correct you. Yeah,
we have listeners. I mean, I respect you guys as well, but we have listeners.
turning off in their
Who
droves.
can tell who are smart? Our listeners are super smart, and they can email us and say, or send us a voice note saying, "Hey, in 90 seconds, here's why you're wrong, Jonty."
Yeah. And the Platonic dualism as well just to be clear, I did also actually pay attention in philosophy and the difference between the ideals versus the reflections, like the ideal version of something and then its copies. Fuck, I'm not using good philosophical terms. Anyway. Yes.
As defined by Plato, right?
As defined. Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
That's the guy.
Yeah. And there's a lot of criticism of Christianity being too influenced by Platonism.
That's interesting because it's also, this is maybe a bit of a tangent, but like...
It's a dualism that doesn't want to have sex with you, just wants to be your friend. That's a Platonic dualism.
That's the one. Yeah. Go on friend dates. Because as I become more of a raging liberal and listen to kind of probably trendy Western versions of Eastern thought, like Buddhist and Hindu, then that would be more dualist, right?
Yeah, completely. So in kind of Vedic tradition, you want to, and again, apologies to anybody who is an actual Buddhist who's like, that's bullshit, man. You know how they say it.
Buddhists.
All those Buddhists listening to Bare Christianity.
Honestly, I wouldn't be super surprised. But in Vedic kind of thought, like Hindu and Buddhist thought, the idea is that as we fear hell as a kind of, this is the ultimate negative state in which to end up, they would fear rebirth and karmic attachment to and trappedness in a physical form. And so if the Buddhist kind of ideal desire is to separate yourself from desire itself, it's because spirit is good and matter is bad. So a lot of asceticism that you find in both Eastern and Western religious tradition is, and the kind of rejection of pleasure and self-denial as a kind of core thing, which is I still think self-denial is a healthy thing within Christianity, obviously as well. But a lot of that kind of more extreme thought around that comes from an idea that the physical is bad. And you see this in some of Paul's thinking, where he talks about the flesh as separate from the spirit. And there have been a lot of criticisms of him, as I understand it, saying that he was too influenced by Platonism in the way that he explained, which opens up a huge thing about like how much of scripture is also metaphor for divine truth, or how much of scripture is apologetics, particularly when at the hand of Paul. But
I love that. I love hearing about what Paul would have thought as a Pharisee and how that informed either, he might have swung too far the other way on some things.
Well, he's fascinating, right? Because he's a Hellenist and he's a Pharisee. He's bringing together Jewish thought and Greek philosophy, and Jewish spirituality and Greek philosophy. It's kind of awesome.
But and I also liked how Tom said, just the way it explained Paul being like, "Oh yeah, everyone's resurrected at the same time." And then Jesus is resurrected, and just that quick turning on a sixpence. Oh no, yeah, one first and then the rest. That's what I meant.
Yeah, I also really like, because I feel like this is a. Do you ever find this when you're kind of talking about spiritual stuff or stuff to do with God, and you just have these unintended themes that come out? Whenever I put together this magazine I used to edit for kind of Christian thinkers, I remember unintended themes coming out that would kind of pick out motifs across very different writers talking about different things. But she talks about a kind of, not being too attached to the metaphors, and he talks about a reverent agnosticism in these things of like, don't be too certain and too sure about these things, and maybe, is it Paul who says, let's not get too hung up on disputable matters? We can't, it is okay to say we're not sure about this. We can still be in possession of truth without being, down to the letter of exactly what's going to happen if that's not the most important thing, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Like in all the letters in the New Testament, it's not people saying, oh well, this is exactly like laying out this is 100% what's going to happen in heaven, like this is what's happened. It's laying out kind of advice and instructions of how you should be living to get to heaven, which is clearly, I think the point is that that's what you should be focusing on. Like, we don't need to be focusing like necessarily on like what's gonna happen, but like rather focus on stuff that's actually given more time and I don't know, writing in New Testament in it.
Yeah, I always used to, when I was a young fundamentalist, I feel like I had a bit of a hand. That's my song. I thought I had a reasonable handle on this in terms of like when people would start arguing about like, they wanted to start condemning, homosexuals or any of that kind of stuff. And my brother, who was much more hardcore than I was, would always just be like, "Is it a salvation issue? If not, I don't care." It's just like, you want to start giving people crap about stuff? Is it a salvation issue? Then no. Which I kind of like, because there is that, there's a pluralism in it. I've been thinking a lot about how Jesus defines salvation in Matthew 25 as how you treated the poor and the weak and the sick and the prisoner. And then in another place defines it as, well, if you believe, and if you speak with your lips. Is it Jesus who says that? It's just, wow, now I sound like I've never read the Bible. I read it.
That sounds like Paul. If you confess in your heart and say in your mouth that he was raised from the dead, one of your nostrils.
That's right. That's right. Oh, that dualism. I just think that's really beautiful. That is all I really wanted to say about that. Anyway, I think we'll probably do an episode on the penal substitution, atonement theory, Christus Victor, all the other ones. If you have any specific questions or thought that you'd like to share with us about that sort of stuff, you can drop us a voice note on SpeakPipe, going to speakpipe.com/beerchristianity. You can also tweet us at beerchristianity, or beerxianity is our handle on Twitter. You can message us on direct messaging on Instagram. You can send us an email at beerchristianity@yahoo.com. All sorts of things like that. There's also another way that you can keep in touch with Beer Christianity, which is we have a newsletter that we're now going to be publishing about weekly, I think, generally, on a platform called Substack. All you need to do is enter your email address, and then you'll get it's not a written version of this, really. It's going to be different stuff, mostly written by me, but there'll also be other contributing writers. Laura's got some ideas. I know Malky's got loads of ideas. So yeah, we're going to be putting some stuff out. We'll also get some guests in this as well. And you can subscribe to that at beerchristianity.substack.com. And yeah, find us there, put in your email address, tell your friends, all that sort of stuff. We actually got a decent number of subscribers already. We've only done one. So yeah, kind of cool. In the spirit of adverts, Malky, I believe that you have a message from our sponsors.
The latest statistics. Oh, no. Nope. See, I didn't want to get into like a... The latest statistics tell us that 90% of fake news comes from 60% of so-called experts, 34% of the time. That's why you need a source of unvarnished and uninformed opinion that you can trust. On the Malky Curry Walk Past podcast, we asked the most pressing questions of the day to real people who just happened to walk past. This week on the podcast, I'll be asking, what about those Brexit tariffs? To a man with a brown dog. I ask a lady in a red hat how she would improve race relations in America. And finally, I asked 2 school children if I should be worried about catching autism from the COVID vaccine. Every week, you'll hear quick and easy answers to the most complex questions facing humanity. Simply visit www.walkpast-podcast_ malky-curry.net/sign-up-form. All you need to do is complete a simple 15-page sign-up form and you'll receive episode 1 free in the post on a CD-ROM. The Malky Curry Walk Past podcast, your favourite Beer Christianity host, goes solo with mixed results.
I mean, this sounds way too close to home for the Bare Christianity newsletter. I'm just going to put that out there. Amazing.
Also, not a terrible idea for a podcast.
And I reckon it would, because A, it would be shorter than this one. B, it would tell people what they wanted to hear. And so, probably do a lot better than this one.
Yeah.
Let's do it, guys, and let's monetize. This will be the last episode of Bare Christianity. Thank you so much for listening and being with us for all this time. Actually, we are kind of getting towards that point where this is like a really long time to ask people to listen to Bare Christianity. So, New Year's resolutions. Let's see where we are with last year's, and let's see what we are going to resolve for this year. Laura, what were your resolutions from last year on our final episode of 2019?
Well, full disclosure, I did re-listen to the beginning of that episode to find out what we said, but I didn't actually write anything of note down other than...
That seems entirely in keeping with the spirit of this podcast.
I wrote down the two notes I took from the beginning of that episode were new fave bread, honey-soaked seeded loaf at Aldi, and Robert email. So... took some real good.
Robert
notes.
here, Nick. Robert
yeah,
here, Nick.
That was when he emailed us and we answered his questions. So shout out to Robert.
And he's also been on A Tale of Two Singles as well. He was one of the guests on the Asking Guys thing.
I don't know if his name is actually on that.
Okay. Well, they don't know which one he is.
Well, I don't know. It's a surprise.
So
is he one that got a free beer?
He is the one that got a free beer, the very first.
He is indeed.
Of, I think, very few other people.
Yeah.
who got given beers. So kind of so lucky.
Do you remember what your resolution
So I listened back to some of it, and my general thing is, which I stand by, is I don't really like New Year's resolutions. I see why some people will find them helpful. Personally, I'm bad at giving myself arbitrary goals and then just not sticking with them because, why would I? So I generally don't subscribe to New Year's resolutions. However,
I do subscribe to Bare Christianity, the newsletter.
Because Jonty forced me to sign up to it.
That is correct.
Absolute truth. But Drabs, I will remember you.
In the arms of the angels.
Mentioned he creates faith goals rather than resolutions every year, and some of them carry over.
Of course he fucking does.
Of course he fucking does. So yeah, I made a couple of them, and it was to be more like reflexive in my. Is that a word? Don't know. Reflex.
Reflective, maybe?
No, like as in like a reflex, like.
Oh, reflexive. Okay,
reflexive.
Yeah, no, that's yeah.
There we go. It is.
No, you go. Yeah, it's totally a word.
It's a word.
Just
sure.
Seems weird.
Whatever
it is.
It
sounds like it's not.
Seems like a fucked up thing to commit to, but not criticizing the word anymore.
Faith as a reflex is what I kind of said of just like instinctive. Instinctive is a better word of just instinctively relying on faith and prayer and stuff like that, which I think I've done better at. I think that's a good. I'm better at it. Not perfect, but
I think you've become like more.
Holy.
I think you've definitely like become more like spiritually engaged as your baseline, than you were a year ago, for sure.
I think that, so there we go, one ticked off.
Praise God, that's awesome.
And then the other one was to read my Bible more, which probably I haven't done as well. But this year she says I am going to try and do the Bible in a year. I haven't started yet.
You read 4 books in the last 2 days. I feel like
4 books in the last 4 days, and they were children's books.
That was unreasonable. Sorry, 4 books in 4 days. That's much more. If I could read a book in 2 months, I would be winning. I think that's a very doable resolution.
Thanks. And I'm also sticking with my comments from last episode of learn shit in it.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to be doing. I have actually genuine resolution. I have ordered in the post a copy of Mere Christianity, and I pledge I will read Mere Christianity this year.
That's fantastic. It's such a great book.
I've heard very good things, and I feel bad that I haven't read it, bearing in mind this podcast is literally named after it. So I will hopefully, fingers crossed, have read it.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Did you hear what my resolution was?
Something about being more psychologically stable was what I could remember.
That did not happen in 2020. No, that was not a year of psychological stability. But it was. Yeah.
I was just trying to, give you encouragements, like, off the back of a semi-heavy episode on mental health and that.
Mm-hmm.
You've done stuff, right?
Oh yeah, I have actually. I mean, I'm doing counseling. I am trying to think more healthily and do the things that keep me healthier. And
It's like going to A&E when you have a broken arm.
I don't necessarily have a broken arm. I'm treating this. They always say, like, if you had a broken limb, would you treat it the way that you treat depression? And the answer, my friends, is yes. For the sake of consistency, yes, I will. If it's still bad tomorrow, I will go to A&E, and you'll hear on the next episode whether my arm was in fact broken. And if it was, that's going to be kind of embarrassing. But no, I think I actually did some stuff for that. And actually, your resolution, Laura, of like wanting to learn shit in it, I was trying to do that and asked a friend of mine, David Kerrigan, who one day I hope we can get on the podcast, if he could lend me his book by Sam Wells on Stanley Hauerwas. It was called Transforming Fate into Destiny. And he was like, sure, just tell me what your address is and I can drop it off. And then he flippin' bought it for me on Amazon. Like a ledge. What a sweetheart.
Got a nice picture of Stanley Hauerwas on it.
I know, it's a lovely picture of Stanley Hauerwas. So I'm super excited about reading that and hopefully getting a little bit smarter. Malky, you weren't on the podcast when we made these resolutions, so we're not super interested in your resolutions, but we want to know how well you've done with Drabses. In the arms of the angels.
I think that's only fair.
You.
Yeah. So Laura, what were Drabses generally? What were his faith goals?
There was something about making his family be a blessing to everyone.
How have you been doing with that, Malky?
Everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah, everyone.
To all the people.
Did she stutter? Everyone.
Be a blessing.
You're a blessing yet?
I don't feel blessed.
I'm distinctly unblessed by your family.
Your family have not blessed me this year.
I mean, they've not been actively aggravating many people.
Which for my last year, to be honest, that actually puts them in the category of blessing.
Right, we need to get in touch with Drabs and get him on a SpeakPipe
and ask him how he thinks Malky has done with
with his resolutions.
Drabs' resolutions. Yeah, that's excellent. In terms of this year, Malky, do you have any resolutions?
So I would empathize with not being a big fan of them, mainly because a year is a long old time. Like, who are we kidding? Who's going to keep something up for a year? But like, I do like to operate within months. I'm going to say it because it's a thing, but off social media for the month of January.
Wow.
Ooh.
The reason I hesitate about saying it is because I didn't do that thing where I'm like doing a Facebook status. Hey guys, I'm going to be taking a break. So contact me.
But you unhealthy motherfucker, you can stay right here. You guys enjoy wasting your lives on social media.
Yeah.
Have a good time. I'll come back to you purer and better.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm doing that. And yeah, these days, just constantly reviewing and working on mental health and life balance and stuff. And yeah, for me, like daily and weekly and monthly, I don't know, constant reflection and all that. So yeah, that's a bit vague and rubbish, but there you go.
I don't think that's vague or rubbish at all.
I don't think so.
Pretty reasonable.
Better to be vague and rubbish, because if you've got concrete goals and you don't hit them, then it's more obvious. Right, you've got more leeway if you've got a vague goal.
Yeah. Plan for failure.
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate aim here.
how I
Yeah,
live my
so
life.
basically, the social media thing, that could be a year-long thing, because I'd like my relationship with that to change, the relationship with my phone to change, and to be like, I pick it up when I need it, as opposed to just constantly checking every 3 to 5 seconds.
That's
Yeah,
valid.
but if this means that you take even longer to reply to WhatsApp messages, I'm going to be raging. Laura, aside from learning shit and reading the Bible, do you have any others?
I have some reading goals. I don't know if that's the same. I read 50 books in 2020. I'm going to try and do that again.
Amazing.
But actually aim to read 50 books, because last year I technically only aimed to read 40. So now I'm actually going to aim to read 50. And I've got a poster on my wall of like 100 good books. And I'm going to try and get to 50, having read 50 of my 100.
Nice.
I've read 35 so far, so I think doable.
Right,
That's very cool.
In that case, because like I read like one book last year, which I've been quoting pretty much
Was it
incessantly
a
in the
more
podcast.
Christ-like God?
So I feel like you need to up your game a bit with just some, even if they're invented quotes,
So
as
you think
Saul
you're
says,
saying I need to up my
blah,
game
blah,
and
blah, blah, blah.
You need to quote the books that you're reading.
quote the books that I'm reading?
Yeah.
So like I think the way we can understand the Atonement, like in the third Percy Jackson book, I think my resolution, I also am not really great at making resolutions, but I think one year I realized that I had kind of lost my sense of wonder at the world. And so resolved to have more kind of like wonder and intensity in my engagement with the world. That led to some very complicated things. So I'm hesitant to
I want to go down that road.
to do that again, but at the same time I do kind of miss that sense of wonder. So who knows? I think what I would like for my coming year is to write more and to read more, actually, and to just kind of to understand more, but more broadly. Like I want to read about everything from script writing and theology through to more kind of political stuff. I want to read more poetry. And I probably also want to get a little bit physically healthy. I think that would be good, because otherwise I'm going to
fixing the broken
very
arm
young.
is first on the list.
I was thinking more of losing weight, but you always come back to this. You should go to A&E, like just, you know what it is? It's broken limb shaming. And, I think you're in danger of being cancelled, Laura. That's what I'm going to say.
Well, I made it thus far into 2021 without being cancelled.
It's pretty impressive.
3 days.
I'd like to see more people being body positive about fractured limbs.
Exactly, because there's this is the thing, is the media wants you to believe that you have to have intact bones in order to be a healthy person, but actually that's an unrealistic body image that they're promoting. And no.
I want to see a Dove advert where people are physically in pain because they should be
touching their ribs, standing in their pants. If anybody wants to model for photos of people with limb problems in a Dove advert and send them to us, we will put them together as a poster. That is our commitment to you. Thank you for listening to Beer Christianity, episode 1 of 2021. I cannot believe we've been doing this for over a year now. That's so freaking cool.
I think it's been longer than a year.
Yeah, I know, but like we started in December 2019, I think.
No, we didn't.
And
We
when did we
started
start?
in September 2019.
Oh, wow, I put that on a job app. Legit, yesterday.
We literally did an episode of Happy Birthday Big Christianity. Because it was after Greenbelt.
Well, I'm more concerned now about saying attention to detail is one of my strengths on that job.
Brilliant.
it's not like something they can easily check.
To be fair, they would have to listen to the podcasts. So
So
No, they wouldn't.
there's a win.
oh no, they wouldn't. Damn it!
Open the app, scroll to the first one. Oh, this guy's an idiot.
That is true. Well, I'm going to have a lot more time than I was probably hoping to do this podcast. So, expect more listeners. It's going to be good. Thank you for listening. You guys are awesome. Please do continue to send us questions and feedback and just tell us what you think. Share it with your friends, all that kind of stuff that would be helpful for podcasts. And yeah, it's been nice talking to you. have a lovely day / morning / evening. Bye.
Bye.